Good morning, children. In the first session, we have already seen the introduction of the story, The Rat Trap. Now, today, we'll take up some of the other aspects of the story, The Rat Trap. You have been introduced the theme, plot, and the writer of the story, The Rat Trap. Selma Lagerlöf is famous Swedish writer. And in this story, she wants to give us a message that a person who may be cruel, who may be wicked, who may be a thief, a great transformation can come in him if he is treated with sympathy and compassion. So let us see the characters of this story and also we'll discuss the main points and we'll end with short summary of this story, The Rat Trap, written by Nobel laureate Selma Lagerlöf. At first, we'll discuss the importance of the title. This title is very apt and appropriate because the whole story is around the rat trap peddler and the way he views this world as a trap. And the human being is like a rat. He is like a rat. There are so many baits, there are so many temptations, like joys. And once when somebody gets attracted by that, then he gets into the trap. The Rat Trap is an appropriate title as it is a story of a rat trap peddler. The word rat trap throws light on the human dilemma with respect to the functioning of the world and society. Just like a rat is fooled by the bait and gets trapped, similarly, even human beings also tend to fall into the trap of material benefits provided by the world. The story revolves around the incident of a man getting trapped due to his greed. Hence, the title is a very apt one. And also, it is worth noticing and remarkable how the story ends with a note of hope. So, it ends on optimistic note. The background of the story or the setting. There's this popular writer is from Sweden. So, she's a Swedish writer. And this story is set amidst the mines of Sweden. So Sweden, it's a rich in iron ore, and that also figures in the history and legends of that country. And the way the story is told, it is told in the manner of a fairy tale. At the beginning, is a very pessimistic, and the way he thinks about the world in a very philosophical manner. The world is a rat trap, and he feels that the temptations that are there in this world, they are just like the bait as it attracts the mouse into the rat trap. Similarly, the world is a trap, and a person, when he gets attracted by the bait, by the temptation of the joys or his luxuries, then one day he gets caught, and it's very difficult for him to come out of that. Let us study the characters of this story in detail. So, the main character here, the protagonist, is a peddler whom The iron mill owner thinks that he is the captain, wants still his acquaintance when he was there in the army. But later he recognizes that it is not so, and he is a rat-trap sailor. The most important character is of Edla, who brings about a great transformation in Pedla. She is the daughter of the iron mill owner. Then iron mill owner who invites at the beginning to Rattrap sailor to his house is reluctant. Then his daughter, who wanted him to be the guest for Christmas Eve, then very important character is that of a crofter too, because the first story is dealing with the character of a crofter whose money is stolen, and when the transformation comes in him, then after that he returns that money, that amount. And helpers in the mill, small blacksmiths, they are very minor characters, but the most important character is a peddler, then Edla, crofter, and iron mill owner. At first, we'll discuss about the protagonist, the narrator of this story, peddler, rat trap sailor, whom the iron mill owner thinks that he's a Captain Von Stale. And this peddler was a poor vagabond without in having a house, moving from place to place. He sold rat traps to earn his living or keep his body and soul together. He also resorted to thievery when required. So what he was doing, he was selling the rat traps and sometimes is to even steal. He was struck with a dark realization that the world is itself a rat trap. And all men and women are just like rats that are vulnerable to be trapped to various types of bits, to various types of temptations. He was inherently not a bad person. He had some goodness in him, and that was by Idla, the Iron Master's elder daughter. And in the end, he transformed himself and returned the stolen money of the crofter because of Edla's love, care. The first story is of a crofter. So, crofter is also an important character here who is very happy to receive this peddler as a guest. And he provides him whatever is needed, plays game with him, provides him tobacco too. But ultimately, what he does, he was so kind and generous. But what this peddler does, he steals whatever saving he had. And this crofter was lonely. He had nobody to talk, and he was very happy when this peddler comes because he feels that he has got a companion for a night. He was happy to see the peddler, gave him shelter. This gesture made the peddler feel welcome, comfortable because he was used to seeing so and unwelcome faces ordinarily. He was generous. So this crofter was very generous and kind. He had been a crofter at Ramjo Ironworks. He trusted the stranger easily with his confidences. So he trusted the stranger. Tom is an iron master. So he's again and again referred as iron master, who is the owner of the large iron factory, Ramjo Ironwork. So this character is a very important character for us because he has invited him to his house. But when he was reluctant, he doesn't mind. But then his daughter invites, and then later he finds that that person was not his old acquaintance and is very angry. He threatens him. So the Iron Master was the owner of the large iron factory, Ramjo Ironwork. His greatest ambition was to ship out good iron in the market. Hard-working, conscious of his duties as he used to go to the forge for nightly inspections. He mistakes the rat trap sailor as his old acquaintance, and his basic instinct was to help him irrespective of his condition, which shows that just like his daughter, even he was kind-hearted and helpful. He took him to his own house and he took care of him. But what has ultimately happened that when he realized that he was not his old acquaintance, he wanted to throw him out. He wanted to hand him over to the sheriff. But later he feels that he should not do that. And it is because of the insistence of his daughter, he allows him to remain as a guest in the house. Edla Wilmanson, very important character. She is the one who has brought about great transformation in the peddler. The peddler who had a very pessimistic viewpoint of the life. At the end, he feels that the world is not so as he had viewed. And at the end, the story ends on a positive note. She was the oldest daughter of the ironmaster. She was not at all pretty but seemed modest and quite shy by heart, very kind hearted, very compassionate woman. And with her compassion, she transforms this peddler. Smart enough to understand rightly from the peddler's eyes that he might have escaped from jail or stolen something. And she was very intelligent. She could understand that he was not the old acquaintance of her father. She knew that he might be a thief, but she was very compassionate and kind hearted. By being a good host, she actually elevated Peddler's nature to that of a captain. She was a great human being. Now, let us discuss some of the words that we are going to come across in this chapter. The words and their meanings. Thievery. You're familiar with the word theft, thievery, stealing. Monotonous, in the same tone. There's no change in the tone, monotonous. Bait, temptations. So, what were the bait? Cheese and pork are the baits for the mouse, for the rat. Dreary, dull, gloomy, sad, dreary. Trudging, walking slowly with heavy steps, as if you are very tired. When you are tired, you walk slowly with heavy steps. Majlis, a card game of Sweden. And crofter and peddler, both of them, they play this game. Kroner, currency of Sweden. Incredulous, incredulous, not faithful. Incredulous, more stomach. And manner, landlord. Valet, a personal attendant. So Edla comes with a valet and then she requests him to come to the house. Forebodings, predictions. What is going to happen in future? You predict about that. Forebodings. Puckered, wrinkled, go downhill. The times have changed with the captain, he feels, and the conditions have been worsened, deteriorated over the period. So don't worry about that. Whatever has happened in the past, jagged, uneven, jagged, uneven. So before we study the lesson, let us see some of the expressions that we are going to come across and their meanings. Keep body and soul together. Keep body and soul together means to manage to keep alive, to survive. So in order to keep body and soul together, what the rat trap peddler was doing, he was selling the rat traps. And sometimes he was resorted to thievery. If he doesn't get any money, what he would do? So he was stealing. Hunger gleamed in his eyes. Hunger was shining in his eyes. Hunger gleamed, feeling so hungry that the expression showed on one's face. So hunger gleamed, one can see in his eyes. Plods along the road, moving along the road slowly but deliberately to walk with a heavy feet. So plodding, moving slowly on the road. Unwanted joy, unusual pleasure, unusual happiness, impenetrable prison, impassable confinement. The forest appeared to be impenetrable prison. He was not able to come out of that, not at a haughty consent, very haughty, very proud, indifferent agreement. Eased his way, moved himself slowly and carefully, fallen into a line of thought. So some thought, agreement of thought, he has fallen into that line of thought. Things have gone downhill. Things have become worse over the period. Things have become worse. Let us discuss the main points of this story before we go into the story. This story underlies the belief that essential goodness in human beings can be aroused through sympathy, understanding, and love. And that is the message of this story. Now let's see what is the story here. Once a man went around selling small rat traps, but he took to begging and thievery to keep his body and soul together. Then one day he was struck with the idea, and it was a philosophical idea. And what was that? The whole world is a big rat trap, and it offers riches as bait. People let themselves be tempted to touch the bait or the temptation. Then it closes in on them, bring an end to everything. One dark evening, the rat trap peddler sought shelter in an old crofter's roadside cottage. This old crofter gave him food, tobacco, and both of them they played the card game. The next morning, the peddler stole away his 30 kroner. The rat trap peddler escaped into a forest and he got lost there in the forest. While resting on the ground, he recollected his idea that the world is a rat trap and thought his end was very close. Then he heard a thumping sound. Then he reached to that Ramjo Iron Works for a night shelter. The iron mill owner came on his nightly rounds, and then he noticed the ragged rich near the furnace. He thought that he was his old acquaintance Nils Olof. Then he invited him to stay with them for Christmas, but the stranger declined the offer. Then later his daughter Edla Wilmanson persuaded him to go home with him. She requested him to stay for Christmas Eve only. When he was on the way to the iron mill owner's house, the peddler thought that he had thrown himself into the lion's den. So he is going to be in the trap. The next day, in broad daylight, the ironmaster realized that the stranger was not a captain and he threatened to call the sheriff. Edla pleaded for him and asked him to stay back. On the Christmas Eve, they had a dinner. Christmas Eve at Ramjo was as usual and the stranger slept. She made him understand that if he wanted to rest in peace, he would be welcome even next Christmas. And this had a miraculous effect on him. The next morning, they went for early church service, leaving behind the guest who was asleep. And they learned at church that a rat trap peddler had robbed an old crofter. Edla becomes very upset. She realizes her mistake. They reach home immediately and learn that the peddler had already left but had not taken anything at all with him. Instead, he had left a small packet for the young girl as a Christmas present. She opens the packet and finds a rat trap. Because he could give nothing else, he could give only a rat trap. There were three wrinkled 10 kroner notes that he had stolen from Crofter, and also a letter with a request to return the kroner to the Crofter. Let's summarize this chapter very shortly. The story begins like a fairy tale. The central character is a beggar, so he's a peddler, and a petty thief who goes about selling rat traps of wire to make a small living. He finds it difficult to make both ends meet, and that's the reason why sometimes he steals. It makes him reflect about his own condition and the world at large. He realizes that the whole world is nothing but a big rat trap. It offers riches and varied baits to people who bite on them and get trapped in the rat trap. The storyline unfolds gradually with the various baits being offered to the beggar. The old man that the meets is generous with his hospitality, but the bait of the 3 kroner bills is enough to tempt him. Next, at the Ramjo ironworks, while seeking shelter for the night, the tramp bites the bait again offered to him by the owner. Initially, he refuses. Edla, the ironmaster's daughter, offers it another bit of full-hearted generosity, comfortable living, and magically peaceful Christmas for the tramp. Finally, the bitter truth dawns on the host. Edla is downcast when she learns that the peddler is a thief. The tramp undergoes a change of heart after experiencing her kindness. He returns the stolen money and writes a letter to her, thanking her for helping him escape the rat trap. He attains nobility of spirit and becomes Captain Von Still. It is that status or stature that he gets means he becomes as moral as Captain Von Still. The story ends with the victory of human goodness.